Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 57 of the Alabama Liberal Podcast. Today we're going to be talking about Knives Out. Which race is nastier, the Republican Senate primary or the Democratic primary for president? Now, some of you may have caught that debate last week where Michael Bloomberg was getting the shit kicked out of him. And first you had everybody take their shots at Bloomberg. Then Buttigieg and Klobuchar went after each other. Then Warren was going after everybody. It was a free-for-all. It felt like the Maltese Falcon where alliances were shifting minute by minute. And some people might look at that and think, man, that was one nasty race. And boy, the media, they sure seemed to love it, didn't they? The media was just like, oh yes, I thought this was the best debate by far. I'm like, yeah, I bet you did, because all you live for is to just play these candidates off each other. But I think I may have found one race in the United States that's even nastier than this Democratic debate has gotten, and that is the Alabama Senate Republican primary. Now, for those that may not know, you've got Roy Moore, our old favorite Roy Moore. He's probably a politician that now most of America is familiar with, and Jeff Sessions, who was Trump's attorney general before Trump fired him the second he could after the midterms were over, and Bradley Byrne, who's a congressman from Alabama, who I know Roy Moore and Jeff Sessions, they're kind of nationally known figures because of their races, but people may not know Bradley Byrne, but I feel like he's just as big an asshole as they are. He's just less known. And Tommy Tuberville, who was the former Auburn football coach who's running for the Senate seat as well. And so you have a genuinely nasty race. I feel like most of these candidates do not like each other. The ads reflect that. If you get a chance, try to find these ads, because most of the ads that these people are running are nasty, dirty, mean ads. And I've always noticed that Alabama has very contentious Republican primaries. I've lived all over the country. I've lived in New York and California and Minnesota and the different places, and I've never noticed any of those places having anywhere near the negative ads that Alabama does. Alabama, I think, really does pass anywhere else I've lived in terms of negative ads, advertising. Almost all the candidates go negative at some point or another. You almost have to sort of get anywhere. And it usually works, unfortunately, because poor Doug Jones, he's an incumbent Democratic senator in Alabama. If you look at the Deep South, he's one of only two, and it's looking more and more like in the end of the year in November, especially if the Democrats put up some terrible candidate that nobody likes, he'll have a hard time keeping on to his seat. He's routinely listed as the most endangered member of the National Senate. Now, you know that doesn't make him feel great to be the most endangered anything, to know his head's on the chopping block, but the big question is, who will the Republican be that goes up against him? And it's genuinely interesting because this is the first Alabama Senate race that I feel like is getting national attention, where at least two of the candidates are nationally known figures in Roy Moore and Jeff Sessions. But I don't really know how many people listen to this podcast live in Alabama or are from Alabama, because iTunes and different places, they don't give me the data where my listeners are coming from. YouTube, they have a nice little data analytics where iTunes doesn't do that. So I'm going to assume that probably half the listeners probably live in Alabama or maybe somewhere about, Georgia or Tennessee, and maybe about half live elsewhere. Probably a lot of Southern Democrats or people listening to this podcast. It's just my assumption, but I really don't know that for a fact. Basically, I'm going to have to go back and explain exactly how we get to the candidates that we have in the Alabama Senate race, because we got to go all the way back to 2010. So it's 2010, Barack Obama, he's been president for about 2 years, and as of 2010, there's still a Democratic state Senate in Alabama. There's still a Democratic state representatives in Alabama. So both houses of the Alabama state legislature are Democratic controlled. Not the governor's mansion. That hasn't been in a Democrat's hands since Don Siegelman, the last Democratic governor we had, who was erroneously put in prison on some bullshit trumped-up charge that was just absolutely ridiculous, and that never would have happened in New York or California, or a state that the media cares about, but because it happened in Alabama, it was almost like, who cares? We had a podcast episode all about how he was the biggest political prisoner in the country at that time. But it's 2010, the state legislature gets wiped out by the Tea Party wave. I mean, it looked just like tidal wave. People talk about roll tide, the Crimson Tide. It was a literal Crimson Tide washing all over the state. The home county that I'm from, it had a Democratic state representative and state senator. In 2010, they no longer did. But in that year, people pretty much knew that whoever won the Republican primary for the governor's mansion was going to be the governor. So you had Robert Bentley, you had Bradley Byrne, Roy Moore, and I want to say Fob James Jr. Now, James Jr. was hilarious because his whole campaign centered around these ads for, we don't want to let the driver's license test has to be administered in English, so you can't take that test in Spanish. I don't know that there's anywhere in Alabama where they give that test in Spanish. I don't know that that's a thing. That's kind of like when these politicians run saying, I'm going to stop Sharia law when the Muslim population of Alabama is like 3 families in Birmingham. Like there's nowhere really practicing Sharia law there. But they go and they run on that platform, and then they get it put in the state constitution or whatever, and then all these people are like, good, we did it. We stopped Sharia law in Boaz, Alabama. People's fears are really kind of astronomical. I mean, like I remember when 9/11 happened and the Twin Towers go down, and all these people that I lived with, is Marshall County, Alabama next? Like they're going to attack the Boaz Abbottville football game or something like that. Like Al-Qaeda's just staking out high school football games waiting to take somebody down. So there was a lot of fear and paranoia that maybe is not that justified. Fob James Jr. ran his whole campaign on, we got to stop illegal immigrants from taking the driver's license test, which I don't know that they can take it in the first place, but if they can, they definitely don't want them to be able to take it in Spanish. And that's what he ran on, and that's what he lost on. And Roy Moore, people forget, when he ran against Doug Jones, I think it made Roy Moore look a lot more popular than he really was in the state of Alabama, because he had run for governor twice and lost badly twice. I mean, he didn't even make the runoff in 2010. Fob James Jr. and Roy Moore, they lose pretty bad, and you have Robert Bentley, who eventually wins, versus Bradley Byrne. And a lot of people, like my parents and different people, they voted for Robert Bentley in the Republican runoff because they knew Bradley Byrne is an asshole. He doesn't like really public schools generally, definitely doesn't like the teachers union, definitely wants to cut teacher pay and wages and salary. And Alabama's public school system hasn't been properly funded in a very long time. So already they're asking teachers to be like, oh my God, the ceiling just caved in. Just hot glue it back together, who gives a shit? And then they funnel more and more money away into charter schools, private schools, tax cuts for their corporate donors, things like that. And the first place they go to get that is the Alabama Teacher Pension Fund, the General Education Fund, things like that. So now here it is, 2020. And 10 years later, we've got Bradley Byrne, who lost the governor's race, but then he went on to become a congressman. And so now he's Congressman Bradley Byrne running for the Senate at the same time that our state governor, Kay Ivey, is trying to privatize the school board. So the Alabama School Board, they determine things like the budget, and also if the teacher's pension fund is controlled by AEA, the Alabama Education Association. That's the teachers union that a lot of teachers may not realize has done a ton of stuff for them. Basically, their retirement system for teachers is pretty good, and that made up for their horrible wages for so many years. But now with KIV and the state, what they want to do is to make it to where, number one, the state school board is no longer elected, they're appointed, and they're appointed by them. Well, gee, what could go wrong with that? You've only got KIV, who ran the PAC program in the ground, and everything she ever touches fiscally just fucking dies because she doesn't know how to manage anything. And really the only reason she's governor is because she was the lieutenant governor to Robert Bentley, who had a big sex scandal. And the only reason she was lieutenant governor is because when she ran for governor, she realized she couldn't win, and she switched to lieutenant governor and ran for that. And for the 8 years that Robert Bentley was governor, she just kind of sat back and was a daytime drunk that passed out doing different things. Nobody really paid her any attention. But now all of a sudden, she gets to be the governor who can bankrupt the public schools just like she did the PAC program. For those that may not know, the PAC program was a program that when I was a child, my parents were able to buy all of my tuition at one time. It was fantastic. Basically, whatever they would have paid for my college tuition, with the PAC program, it was like 5%. So when you have a kid that's like 5 years old or a toddler, you buy all their college at one time. And if they go to school in state, you've basically reduced their college tuition costs a ton. I mean, it's 5-10% of what you would pay if you didn't get the PAC program. By the time I was in college, Kay Ivey had been managing that fund, the job she had before she was lieutenant governor, and she had mismanaged it into ruin, and there was no money left, and they had to get rid of it. Same thing for the DROP program and some other programs that teachers were able to use. It's all very complicated, but basically she doesn't know how to manage money at all. And now she wants to be able to appoint a school board versus an elected school board, and one of the first things her appointed school board is going to be able to do is say, oh, the teacher pension fund, why don't the political appointees that we put on that board, a bunch of ultra right-wing Republicans that don't believe in public schools, especially don't believe in teacher pensions to begin with, why don't we let them control that? What could go wrong? But this is probably one of the ideas that Bradley Byrne has put into her head. So you have Bradley Byrne, who's basically a Tea Party Republican, who I guess on the surface, he looks like he's not as crazy as the Roy Moores and the Donald Trumps of the party, but I believe he'll be very vindictive. I think he'll hurt public education in a lot of different ways. Then you have Jeff Sessions. Jeff Sessions and Roy Moore are kind of like the one cousin who moved to town, and Sessions, he like eats with a knife and fork, and his table manners are just a little bit better. He looks like he's got some civilization. And then Roy Moore pulls up on a fucking four-wheeler or something like that. Like, he's on a dirt bike, pulls up outside, like, cuz, what's up? You know, he's the country cousin. I mean, he lives way the fuck out in the woods. He goes to a church that may have holiness or brimstone or damnation church or something like that in the title. I mean, fire and brimstone. I won't call Jeff Sessions city, but definitely more of a town vibe or whatever. They're both Republicans, but sometimes in Alabama you have to make choices between who's the worst possible option. Who would be the worst? So, like, sometimes you almost have to think beyond the Democrat that's running. I'll give you an example. My mother ran for state representative. Okay, she ran for the state legislature. This is how I know that the campaigns get very dirty. She ran against a man named Kerry Rich. He's still in the state legislature. Kerry Rich is an asshole, and he doesn't live inside the state of Alabama. In fact, he really lives in a different state, but he owns some kind of property that's inside of that district, so he's able to run for re-election, and he's been state representative for several terms while he's barely lived in the state, right? He never lives in the area that he's representing. The 30 days out of the year that he has to go down to Montgomery and vote on bills, which people may not realize, the state legislature in Alabama, they only work 30 days out of the year. That's it. So almost all these people, they have other business interests, I feel like, conflict a lot with what they're able to do. But for 30 days out of the year, they go down there and pass all these bills. And it's Alabama, so it's all about, yeah, tax cuts good, public schools suck, yeah, let's get rid of this abortion clinic in Birmingham, so on and so on. All basically the same thing. But just for doing that for 30 days, he gets a fairly good salary. I mean, for Alabama, his salary is upper middle class, and he's able to take that money and go live in New Mexico or Colorado, which is where he really lives. I think at one time he lived in Utah. I think now he's moved to New Mexico. But that's where he spends most of the time. He goes from ski slope to ski slope. Some people may insinuate that he's a closet homosexual. I've heard that rumor multiple times. But he's one of these people that every time he runs, it's about the American family. The American family is falling apart. This guy's been married and divorced 3 times. His first wife sued him for child support when they got divorced because he wouldn't pay that. He was a deadbeat dad. His second wife filed a restraining order against him because she said he came after him with a knife. So he's been married and divorced 3 times. He's been sued for child support by his first wife. He's had a domestic abuse charge filed by his second wife. Some people say that when he's in all these ski towns that he actually lives in, he's picking up men at bars. You look at this guy and you think, who the fuck is this clown to lecture anybody about family values and talk about the American family and it falling apart? When he ran against my mom, his whole campaign was, I'm the family values candidate. My mother's actually been married for almost 40 years. Had 2 sons that actually call her, actually like her and her company, unlike his daughter who barely speaks to him. And this guy's running as the family values candidate. And you almost look at this and think, this is absurd. This is ridiculous. But that's how a lot of these people do. Do as I say, not as I do. But when he ran against my mom, she accepted a very tiny amount of money from the Alabama Education Association. The teachers union gave her, I want to say $10,000. I could have that figure wrong, but it was something along those lines. And that enabled her to run a campaign. Kerry Rich raises over $100,000. I mean, he literally raises about 10 times the money that she's able to. And his money comes from people where you wouldn't think had any interest in the state of Alabama. I mean, it was out-of-state corporations and things that were giving him donations, which you almost think, why do they care who the state representative is for Sand Mountain, this relatively small area, right? But he's able to do that, and he's able to raise a ton of money. Then he's able to buy TV ads, which she wasn't even able to afford TV ads. Every single TV ad he's running is negative. She sucks. She's a bitch. I mean, not literally, but those were basically the ads that he was running against her. Very negative ads, very nasty ads. Bombards the airwaves with them for about 2 or 3 weeks. It is a surreal experience to see your mom in a negative campaign ad. I mean, you got your mom who's like been teaching public school for 40 years. Nobody who's ever met her has a bad word to say about her. Everywhere she goes, it's like, hey, how's it going? Kids come up and give her a huge hug. I mean, you can't go anywhere where somebody's not coming up and saying, you made such a difference. You were a great teacher. I remember you read Harry Potter books to me, things like that. And then 2 weeks before the race, you see negative ads bombarding the airways being like, she sucked Satan's cock when she was in hell giving Barack Obama a back rub. I mean, it was like the nastiest ads you could ever see. And most of it revolved around Barack Obama or Hillary Clinton, or she's some type of a puppet for one of them or whatever. I don't know why a national Democratic figure would really care about a Republican primary in the state of Alabama, in a very kind of almost rural area of Alabama. I'm not sure why that would merit national attention, but that's what these candidates run on. They have to run national races because locally people don't care about what they're doing. Now, needless to say, Kerry Rich, the incumbent with 10 times the money that my mom had, he won the race, but it was pretty close, 48% to 52% for a guy that has 10 times the money and is an incumbent and is able to buy TV ads, whereas she wasn't able to buy a single television ad based on the money she had. That's not bad. But people said that one ad he had, it said that, and I'm not kidding, this was an ad that he ran, that she liked Barack Obama's Facebook page. And that was what he used to, anybody who likes Obama is not okay with me, right? That's what he was able to use to kill her chances with. You might say, why did she run as a Republican? The Republican primary of Alabama, that's where the race is decided. A lot of times in the county that I'm from, it went from, in 2010, a Democratic state senator and Democratic state representative. By 2014, it was impossible for a Democrat to win. The race was decided inside the Republican primary. That's the only way that decided the race. That's basically what Alabama still is. And so people are looking at it now and they're almost like, well, who's going to be the next senator? And they're looking at the Senate primary as though Doug Jones is not an incumbent. But when you look at these ads, they're almost comical. I mean, you've got Bradley Byrne running an ad talking about Jeff Sessions let Donald Trump down. And then Jeff Sessions has got an ad being like, Bradley Byrne questioned Donald Trump, whereas I supported him the first and hardest. And Tommy Tuberville's being like, I love Donald Trump more than either one of these traitors do. They are competing to see who can massage Trump's balls the most. I mean, they are trying so hard to suck up to Donald Trump. It's almost incredible. Now, maybe not looking at the polling, that when Donald Trump was elected in 2016, he had like an 80% approval rating in Alabama. By today, it's dropped down to 60%. He's lost a lot of support in Alabama, if you can believe it. Even though he has these massive rallies, I mean, every time he goes to Mobile or wherever, he's always got these big, massive rallies. Alabama is one of the few places where he feels safe, I guess. It still is a very popular state for him. I'm not going to lie, a lot of Alabamians love Trump. They really do. But it's not the support that he once had. And yet, inside the Republican primary, they know who's going to be voting. Think about it. I mean, most of the country, for president, there is no Republican primary. Trump faces very little challengers in most states. I think in 10 states, he doesn't have a challenger. They shut down the Republican primary. And the Democratic side, there is the Democratic primary in Alabama. Biden, he'll probably win the state of Alabama, but, Bernie people will come out, Buttigieg and Warren, and there'll still be a lot of candidates to choose from. So I guess they figure any Democrat who's going to be voting is going to vote Democratic. So we only have to worry about the hardcores, ultra Republicans who are going to show up to vote in this thing. I mean, there may not be sky high turnout for the Alabama Senate race primary. And that's why you've got Bradley Byrne having a commercial where it's like a panel of judges and they say, and Hillary Clinton still isn't in jail. About Jeff Sessions, like the lock her up chant where Hillary Clinton would be in jail. And when he was Attorney General, somehow he failed to find a reason to throw Hillary Clinton in jail, which you might look at that and think, well, that's absurd. That's fucking nonsense. That's crazy. That's the Alabama Senate primary that I'm talking about. One of the leading candidates is talking about how the other wasn't able to personally incarcerate Hillary Clinton or find a reason to get her in jail, regardless of the fact that she's done nothing to be put in jail. Well, why would Hillary Clinton be in jail? I don't know. We'll figure it out later. That's what they did to Don Siegelman. I mean, this is Alabama politics, right? What's their crime? They're a Democrat. I don't think I need to explain any further. I rest my case. And then the jury comes back 5 minutes later and says, hang them high. But then you have Sessions who's counterpunch, and it's actually legitimate, is that in 2016 when Trump was running, Bradley Byrne didn't support him. Back when the pussy grab tape leaked, he told people that he wanted Trump to step down and allow Pence to be president. He's also talked about Trump's close ties with Russia making him uncomfortable. There is some truth. It's true that Bradley Byrne, for a long time, he wasn't on the Trump train, as to where Sessions was the very first senator in the country to endorse Trump and severely get on his bandwagon, mostly because of immigration. Because Sessions, like I said, there's the Roy Moores, which are just up front, like I don't like Mexicans, and then there's the Sessions, who were basically your John Birch Society country club racists, your white-collar racists who have these meetings talking about, the sanctity of the American ideals and the standards, and we don't want to have melting pot America. Multiculturalism is lack of culture. That'll get rid of American culture. I think probably that was the single biggest reason why he backed Trump so early on, and it's true. He was the first senator to back him. Yet when he becomes Attorney General, just because Sessions follows the law a little bit and recuses himself from the Russia investigation, Donald Trump hates Jeff Sessions. The Alabama Senate primary, you'll have Sessions going into a runoff with either Bradley Byrne or Tuberville. Trump is not probably going to say anything until the runoff, but in the runoff, he may pick a side. He may come down hard on Sessions. I mean, this guy was his former attorney general, and they said that just because he recused himself from the Russia investigation, Trump would berate the shit out of this guy. I mean, I like to imagine him just screaming at him and yelling at him, and they said he did. He would call him into the Oval Office and just ream his ass out for different things. And Sessions is a very genteel, he reminds me of that actor from American Horror Story, that Leslie guy. Leslie Jordan. I think he looks just like Jeff Sessions. I mean, this is the guy who should be playing Jeff Sessions if there's ever a movie made about Sessions. SNL should have got that guy to play him on Saturday Night Live before they decided that Kate McKinnon could apparently do anything and then make Kate McKinnon play every part ever. SNL's real bad about that. They had Kristen Wiig the last 5 years she was on SNL. She played like characters that she was wildly unsuitable for just because it was like, well, we've got a female part. We got to give it to Kristen Wiig instead of these other great women that were in the cast. And now it feels like they're kind of doing that with Kate McKinnon a little bit, where it's almost like too much. McKinnon playing like Rudy Giuliani and a very cartoonish version of Jeff Sessions when Leslie would have been perfect. But I mean, look at a picture of Leslie and Jeff Sessions and say, hey, have these two ever been seen in the same room together? Because they could be doppelgangers. But Sessions has got a very effeminate, if he weren't so repressed, fanatical social conservative, you could easily see Jeff Sessions being gay, right? I mean, just the way that he is, the way he talks. I remember watching Kamala Harris ask him questions. He's like, I'm just not used to all these questions. I've got the vapors. You're not even giving me a chance to answer this stuff. So it almost gives you pleasure to think about him with a fan and a fainting couch as Trump's just reaming it out, spitting all over his passed out body. He's just been so beat down by this ultimate bully in the White House. So you've got Sessions, the genteel Southerner who's really not, but yet somehow Byrne, who never supported Trump before he was in the race, now Trump really likes Bradley Byrne. And Bradley Byrne brags about the fact that him and Trump are so close now. After the State of the Union that we just had, Trump apparently called like a dozen or so Congress people to come with him to some kind of after party. And Bradley Byrne is so proud of himself for this. He goes, the White House doesn't just do that willy-nilly. They don't just do that for anybody. I mean, he's bragging on himself, getting chosen to go to this after party. It's so pathetic. It's like somebody finally gets to sit with the cool kids in high school. I got to go to John's party this weekend. You weren't invited, were you? And he's got an ad where it's got Trump mentioning his name 3 or 4 times, about as subtle as a damn brick to the face. I mean, he's got Trump mentioning him by name, and he says, I'm not going to apologize for being friends with the president. So it's weird that even though Sessions really did get on the Trump train earlier than anybody, now he's completely on the outs with Trump. Trump fired him from being Attorney General. In the runoff, he's very likely to endorse whoever is against Jeff Sessions. I mean, he hates him. And yet at the same time, Bradley Byrne, who talked about, Russian collusion is bad and Trump is inappropriate, Mike Pence should be at the head of the ticket. Now, they're best friends. It just further proves the fact that people say Trump does not reward loyalty. He doesn't care about how loyal you are to him. He will throw you under the bus in 5 seconds. It's just a matter of time before he gets rid of you. He doesn't value you. Why should you value him? And so these people like Mike Pence, who would literally drink his bathwater if he told them to, it almost is pathetic to watch somebody be that loyal to a man who hates them. By far, my favorite Never Trump Republican is Rick Wilson, who used to be, he ran some campaigns for Bush and some different things like that. He was big in the Republican Party as an operative. Now he's gone a little bit more to the Democratic side. I think he's not really a Democrat, but he'll work with them just to get rid of Trump. But in his book, he parodies Mike Pence. I mean, where he's like, Trump's like, I don't know Mike Pence. I don't like him that much. I don't care about him. And Mike Pence is like, oh, it was so great and an honor to work with the brightest and most brilliant man I've ever known. I think that kind of toadyism, I don't think Trump respects it at all. I don't think he thinks it's sincere. I think he's almost sets his radar off. It's almost suspicious to him to an extent. And so it is kind of strange that Trump picking Bradley Byrne, the person Trump probably really doesn't want to get the Senate seat, would be Roy Moore. Because Roy Moore, as he said back when he ran for the Senate seat the first time, he was Trump before there was a Trump. Like, he's the guy who's on the Alabama Supreme Court and gets yanked off because he refuses to honor same-sex marriage licenses, telling his circuit clerks, do not honor these marriage licenses. Talks about he's a populist, which apparently populism is now catering to a very narrow segment of America that is very passionate. It's amazing to me to see people like Trump be like, I'm a populist, which is why I support tax cuts for the rich and getting rid of public Social Security, privatizing Social Security, getting rid of pre-existing conditions. People like Roy Moore, all I want to do is make homosexuality criminal and execute gay men for having sex. I'm a populist. That's what populism is. Something 90% of the country would be absolutely horrified by, but the people who live up in the mountains where I live, they're all for this. And Roy Moore fans, they will come out of the woodwork, and I mean that literally because they live in the woods, to vote for him. It's very, very, very doubtful that he'll be the winner of that Republican Senate race. In fact, no, he won't be, because the Republicans look at it and they think, well, he's the only guy who could have lost to Doug Jones 2017 in that special election that we had, and he lost to Doug Jones once, he'll do it again. So they're all wanting to win. They're all wanting to take back this Senate seat. And the fact that Roy Moore, I guess, is a threat to Trump in terms of the biggest asshole in the room contest that they seem to have going on. Really, it does seem like it's going to be Sessions versus either Bradley Byrne or Tuberville in the Senate runoff. Now, out of these four candidates, because again, you got to think the Alabama Senate race, the Republican, you have to think as if Doug Jones doesn't exist. And if it was just between the Senate candidates, just like for the Alabama governor's race, Tommy Tuberville would have been infinitely better than Kay Ivey. Kay Ivey is a fucking moron. She doesn't know what she's doing. She's 70-something years old. A lot of people say she's a full-blown alcoholic. She refused to even debate Tommy Tuberville for the Republican primary, and then refused to debate Walt Maddox, the Democratic nominee for the governor's race, because she knows how bad she'll do. I mean, anybody who refuses to show up to a debate, they know they'll get their ass kicked. Carrie Rich in the race against my mom wouldn't agree to a debate. Kay Ivey wouldn't do a debate when she's running for governor. Trump is threatening not to go to the debate in November. He's already floated this idea several times. The debate's not mandatory. Why should I have to do it? Anybody who just wants to go to rallies to their fans and talk to them and doesn't want to debate, there's something wrong with that candidate. And we saw that with Bloomberg. The guy who has done no debates, who's only talking to people through a national television campaign, we see him get his ass handed to him at the Democratic debate by Warren and Sanders and Biden and Buttigieg. I mean, just about everybody scored on him, right? In terms of Tommy Tuberville, he was the former Auburn football coach. Now, I went to Auburn at the time that he was the football coach. And so if you're looking at it and you think like, okay, if you're stuck with a Republican, I would have chosen Tommy Battles, the mayor of Huntsville. The mayor of Huntsville has been fantastic for the city. He got Google to come in and start putting in more and more high-speed internet. Toyota has agreed to start manufacturing a lot of cars in Huntsville. Obviously, there's the Space and Rocket Center, the Redstone Arsenal, all these defense contractors. Huntsville basically is what Silicon Valley is for tech companies. Huntsville is that way for defense contractors, not to mention the rockets, sometimes called the Rocket City. He was able to get Jeff Bezos to start building some rockets in Blue Origin because Richard Shelby, the other senator from Alabama, was going to block everything that Jeff Bezos was trying to do, basically, until they started to put some jobs in Huntsville. Richard Shelby and Tommy Battles are both very protective of Huntsville. They want it to keep growing and more math and science jobs, more and more engineering. I would say that it is by far the most tech-heavy city inside Alabama, and perhaps could be for the entire southeastern region. For the Deep South, so that would exclude like Austin, Texas, and Virginia, but for the Deep South, I think it could easily be the leader for tech and tech jobs. So of course Tommy Battles would have been a better governor than Kay Ivey. So in that Republican primary, you vote for Tommy Battles. If you have to pick in the Alabama Senate primary, amongst the Republicans, you have Roy Moore, who would make the state look absolutely horrible in the eyes of the nation. You have Jeff Sessions, who we know exactly what he would be as a senator because he was a senator forever. Before Jeff Sessions became Attorney General, he was a senator for almost as long as I had been born. He'd been in the Alabama Senate forever. And you know what he does as a senator, which is absolutely nothing. He sits on his ass, says racist comments towards Mexicans and homophobic comments towards gays, and tries different ways to keep pot illegal in Alabama. Alabama is the only state in America that doesn't sell lottery tickets. So not only can you not buy recreational marijuana, you can't buy medical marijuana. Not only can you not buy medical marijuana, some counties inside the state are dry counties that don't sell alcohol. Not only can you not buy alcohol, there's a sex toy ban. Some counties have a pornography ban. And on top of that, it's the only state in America where you can't buy lottery tickets. So we see what happens when an ultra social conservative like Jeff Sessions is the senator inside Alabama, which is absolutely nothing gets done. No revenue is raised. And then the government comes in later and says, hey, we're out of money. We're going to have to cut funding for public schools so that we can raise a revenue budget. Then you have Bradley Byrne, who I know he's a two-party dickhead who's just going to be awful. So I guess if you have to choose, I guess I go with Tommy Tuberville. And this is saying something that a former football coach is now the least awful choice. That really is saying something, I think. And Tuberville, of course, is trying as hard as he can to suck up to Trump and all of his ads, and probably he does have some affinity for Trump or whatever. Getting past Trump and getting past the nationality of the race, because it's kind of funny to watch all these senators be like, I was against Obama, I'm going to fight Hillary Clinton, as though Hillary Clinton is president. I love Donald Trump, I'm going to name my next kid Trump. I hope that Don Jr. dies in a wreck so that my son can be the new Don Jr. Maybe Trump will adopt him one day. Oh, if Trump would fuck my wife, I would be so happy. Oh my God. It's so pathetic. It almost reminds me of the Trump fans at his rallies, where there was that one fan at one rally who Trump went out of his way to insult him. He goes, this guy's got a serious weight problem. Which you look at Trump at a rally talking about one of his fans having a weight problem, and you expect the irony police to show up and make an arrest. I mean, you really do. Be like, who the fuck is this guy to call somebody else fat? But he lets one of his his fans and says, this guy's got a weight problem. He's so fat. Out of nowhere. I mean, it had nothing to do with what he was talking about. Just brought it up. They found the fan later at the rally and they said, hey, did you resent that? I'm just glad he noticed me. I mean, that's a Trump fan. He'd be like, oh, Donald Trump fucked your wife. Oh, I'm so honored that he picked my wife. If my wife is hot enough to be fucked by him, I'm just amazed and thrilled with that result. It really is pathetic to think that you can have a man who drives hours out of his way to go to a rally, standing up for hours, because you got to stand up hours before the candidate even fucking gets there, at the rally, which is just listening to somebody speak for an hour. I mean, at a concert, you get to hear music. At a stand-up show, you get to hear jokes. At a Trump rally, you're just watching a 70-year-old man with dementia rant and rave about nonsense for an hour and a half, sometimes 2 hours. I mean, it really is about the worst thing you can spend your time, your money, driving across state lines, standing up for hours at a time. I mean, it's a pretty miserable experience, honestly. And you're only doing that to support the president who goes out of his way to call you fat. It really makes no sense. And then to just be thrilled that he noticed you, noticed your girth and your lard ass that he's making fun of. It truly is pathetic. And that's the Alabama Senate primary in a nutshell. But the knives are out and it is dirty. It is nasty. It is mean. I honestly believe that the Alabama Republican Party has the nastiest primaries in all of the nation. When you watch the Democratic ads, California, it's the second biggest media market in America. Most of these campaigns are $1 million campaigns just for city council seats. So they have the money to do TV ads. When you watch their TV ads, you would think it was an ad for Petco. Like you see a fucking guy playing with puppies. Like there'll be some Korean guy being like, I just love puppies and babies. And it's so soft. It's soft as baby shit. There are no negative ads. People probably poll it and say, oh, Californians, they're so mindless and they just like surfing and new restaurants or whatever. A negative ad would definitely turn them off. An ad that's too policy heavy and too negative would turn them off. That's why you turn on the TV and all you see is Tom Steyer talking about how great his family is, his mom and dad, everything he's ever done. Mike Bloomberg, every ad he's got Barack Obama in his ads. And at the debate, they pointed out that Bloomberg did not support Barack Obama for president. He didn't vote for him, didn't support him. But then now that he's running as a Democrat, me and Barack Obama, we're best friends practically. Like, we love each other. Every ad that I've got, you've got old clips Barack Obama recorded like 10 years ago, dubbing in for Bloomberg as though he's endorsed Bloomberg. And so, no, I guess he's trying to cut into Joe Biden's support. Maybe, I guess that's his ticket. But the second nastiest race in the country, they have to really be aware of this. A lot of things are going around that are fooling people. This is a very contentious race. I read where in North Carolina, that's another seat that Democrats think that they can pick up. So the most vulnerable senators on the Republican side, Colorado, Maine, North Carolina, and I believe Georgia, are the ones that they're really targeting, trying to flip, trying to get the Senate back in control of Democratic hands. The North Carolina Senate seat, there's one candidate that they're definitely afraid of. This guy Cunningham, that they're really afraid of. They think he can beat Tom Tillis. So instead, Mitch McConnell's super PAC has went and dumped a bunch of money into the Democratic primary challenger, Erica Smith, trying to pump her to the front. So if Erica Smith is the Democratic candidate, they believe that she will lose to Tom Tillis. But if it's Cunningham, they're afraid that it'll be a competitive race and they could wind up losing. So you got to be aware of that. These super PACs, they're giving money, a lot of it Republican money, to weaker Democratic primary challengers that they feel will be easier to beat. AOC, I saw where she had launched a super PAC. It would not surprise me if a lot of the funding that comes into that is from Republicans, knowing that any candidate she endorses is only going to take seats away from Democrats. The Bernie people and the AOC people, they've never done this. They've never gone to Alabama and endorsed Adderholt. Robert Adderholt has been the congressman from my area for 20 years. They've never gone to Alabama and been like, let's get a Democratic candidate and put it up against Adderholt and flip that seat from red to blue. They've never done this. They've never flipped red to blue seats. All they've ever done is primary older, you could say lamer, kind of tired, big city Democrats. They only win, turn blue districts bluer, which is not really what needs to happen for the country to move in the right direction. So probably you're seeing AOC Super PAC got $10 million, and then you see where the Koch brothers dumped a bunch of money into it or whatever at the last minute, knowing that it's only going to fuck up the Democratic Party. So speaking of the Democratic Party, though, let's talk about that debate, because it was by far the nastiest. It was by far the meanest. Poor Bloomberg could see it looked like he had a black eye. And I think it's just really bad makeup that he was using. But both of his eyes looked like they had some shading where somebody had literally beat him up before the debate. And if he didn't feel that way before the debate, he felt that way after it. Terrible candidate. I mean, this is what people like me have been saying for a long time. He's not a good candidate. He's a better funder than candidate. What he should have always done, him and Tom Steyer both, should have put all their fortune behind Joe Biden or Pete Buttigieg. That's what they should have done. Stay out of the race. don't run as yourself, but put your fortune behind somebody else that maybe can get enough of that non-Bernie vote to become the nominee. And people are being like, Bernie Sanders, he just won Nevada. How can you sit here and talk about he shouldn't be the nominee? He's so electable. In the Nevada caucus, 5,000 people voted. This is not anywhere near the eligible voters for the state of Nevada. So no, I don't think winning a majority of 15% of Iowa. In Iowa, less than 15% of the people voted. In New Hampshire, I think the turnout was about the same as 2016, and he did worse there than he did in 2016. In the Nevada caucus, winning a plurality of 5,000 people, this is not convincing me that he is going to be able to win the entirety of the country. And all it is that you have a lot of these caucus states that really suck, as I've talked about before. Like, you're just mad that your boy Joe Biden, he's doing so bad in these caucuses. They're not designed for candidates like that. As I've talked about before, caucuses suck. They're time-consuming. They only bring out the most passionate fans possible. They're not remotely representative of what the majority of the state feels or is going to vote in a general election. So, of course, Joe Biden's going to do worse in some place like a caucus, and Bernie Sanders is going to do better. It just sucks for me to watch this happen, where you've got 6 major candidates that are all competing for roughly the same votes. I know people seem to think that Elizabeth Warren, somehow her support is from Bernie people. That's false. Every Elizabeth Warren supporter I've seen on Twitter or social media supported Hillary Clinton in 2016. Elizabeth Warren, the majority of her votes are coming from ultra policy wonks like Ezra Klein and these fucking dorks and stuff, and basically women that would like to see a female president. There's no reason whatsoever to think they would go to Bernie Sanders if she dropped out of the race. But in the debate, she's hitting Bloomberg on all these things, like releasing women from non-disclosure agreements. They sound great on a Democratic debate stage. Do people actually care about it? I'm very doubtful. I don't think anybody's looking at Bloomberg and being like, well, I was going to vote for him, but the fact that he made a woman sign a non-disclosure agreement because he called her a horse-faced lesbian, no, he's lost my vote there. All that really does is underscore the fact that Bloomberg is way too similar to Donald Trump. Fellow New York billionaire who has women sign non-disclosure agreements, is roughly the same age, by the way, was a fucking Republican. To me, that's the single biggest disqualifier. It was a Republican until he had to run for president. The same way that I know a lot of people don't care that Bernie Sanders wasn't a real Democrat until he had decided to run for president, but it does bother me. I'm with Buttigieg. In the Democratic primary, how about voting for an actual Democrat instead of a guy who's an independent and another guy who's a Republican? Surely there's a better option than either burning the party to the ground or trying to buy it out. People always look at it and they say, well, Alabama liberal, you're so wrong. Look at these lamestream Democrats, Al Gore and Hillary Clinton and John Kerry, they all lost. Al Gore and Hillary Clinton won the popular vote by 3 million people and lose the Electoral College by 3 states. I didn't think that was mathematically possible. Nobody could have expected that. It's never happened before. Al Gore might have won the Electoral College. The Supreme Court shut down the recount in Florida for no fucking reason. They completely overstepped their boundaries. That was totally inappropriate. They should not have done that. So when the Supreme Court shuts down the recount in Florida, Florida goes to Bush. If not for that, Al Gore not only wins the popular vote, but wins the presidency. In those 2 cases, you're talking about candidates that I think there was reasons to believe that the vote was stolen from them or cheated from them somehow. And then you only have John Kerry. John Kerry is the most liberal presidential candidate in my lifetime. The 2 most liberal presidential candidates in my lifetime is Michael Dukakis and John Kerry, and they both lost. They're the only 2 people that have lost the popular vote on the Democratic side. The centrists are Bill Clinton, Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton, and Al Gore. All of them won the popular vote, and at least 3 of them probably won the Electoral College, except for cheating. So there is reasons to believe that centrist Democrats will do better in the general election than the Dukakises and the George McGoverns and the Adlai Stevensons and the John Kerrys of the party that keep getting their ass handed to them in the general election. We don't have evidence that just because a plurality of 5,000 people in Nevada like Bernie Sanders and are willing to spend all day in the fucking Nevada heat voting for him in the caucus, that he's more electable. And it has become abundantly clear that Bernie Sanders is who Trump really wants to run against. But that's all about the Democratic primary, and we'll get to that in the very next episode. But I just think that it's been interesting to watch these 2 races devolve into as nasty as they can, and very exciting for the media, who of course lives to play these candidates off each other. I mean, that one woman who was at the debate, people were applauding her, being like, oh, she was the first time a debate moderator's been pregnant. I mean, I saw one headline that said, debate moderator working while pregnant, as opposed to what? Taking her behind the barn and shooting her? Like, I mean, do they think women don't work while they're pregnant? My wife worked weeks before she gave birth. I don't know where people are getting this, like, she needs to be applauded for that. Women do that shit every fucking day. It's not that unusual, but people made a big deal about it because I guess it's the first time it ever happens, and we're obsessed with, just because it's the first time we we've seen something, we think it's the first time it's ever happened. When there are women that are 8 months pregnant working a fucking Walmart checkout line right now. Women don't typically take a long maternity leave before they give birth. They can't afford to. But that woman, I mean, she was like, Bloomberg, they called you an asshole in high school. What do you say about them? Well, here's what I think about that. Obvious that the media was playing them off each other, trying to twist them, trying to get them to go after each other. The debate coverage, all the Republican coverage said the big winner in that debate was Donald Trump, which to be honest is somewhat true because you have a party that looks incredibly divided and it looks like they're not going to go into the convention with a clear candidate. And that's very good for Trump. That's a horrible case for us. That's why I've been putting so much pressure on Warren and Klobuchar and Tom Steyer and Bloomberg to drop the fuck out of the race immediately. Those four need to drop out tomorrow and put all their support behind Buttigieg and Biden, and maybe one of those two by Super Tuesday, it'll become clear which of those two have consolidated the non-Bernie vote. But they should have done this months ago. I'm getting real frustrated watching the horse race go back from being like, Klobuchar had a good debate performance, so she's the one to take on Bernie. Oh no, Warren had a good debate performance, she's the one who should take on Bernie. Mike Bloomberg, he's spending the most money, so he's the one who should take on Bernie. It's been clear for a long time that only Biden and Buttigieg have a viable path to the nomination besides Bernie. But all this diddling and fucking around and 6 candidates splitting the vote, that allows Bernie to go forward. And just as a case to show you what I'm talking about, that's exactly what happened in 2016 when all these candidates wanted to be the one to beat Trump and then he got the nomination. That's what happened in 2017. Just to bring it full circle back to Bama, right? Roy Moore and Luther Strange. Luther Strange, he'll beat Roy Moore. Roy Moore comes out of that primary as the nominee, and then Doug Jones turns around and beats his ass. By a narrow margin, sure, but beats him. Whereas it would have been very tough to imagine Luther Strange losing to Doug Jones. But it was one of those things where you had all the establishment, they thought they had it all figured out and it was in the bag and it didn't matter. We've now got Bernie Sanders winning 3 states in a row, either tying Buttigieg or winning 3 states in a row. He comes into Super Tuesday with incredible momentum, and if enough candidates don't drop out tomorrow, it's very tough to see him not becoming the nominee. Or nomination going to a brokered convention, which would be pandemonium. And either way, it would guarantee Trump is reelected, either one of those outcomes. But the media is so obsessed with the race got nasty. And we saw Buttigieg and Klobuchar, they were going at it. And it looked like Klobuchar was going to throw a binder at Buttigieg and take him out. They were just way too into that. I heard a lot of people say, oh, this was the most substantial debate on policy. No, it wasn't. It was petty and personal attack. It was them going after each other for shit that they did a long time ago. Elizabeth Warren, well, how come a girl in high school said that you whistled at her? Warren kind of fucking kills me because she puts forth more bullshit purity tests than anybody I've ever seen that she can't pass. First, Buttigieg, he had fundraisers in a wine cave, so he's an asshole. Well, she had fundraisers in a wine cave 2 years before that for her Senate race. Oh, all these candidates are taking corporate PAC money because they're Wall Street sellouts. There was something 2 days ago that said somebody asked her about her super PAC. Super PAC can support me if they want to. It's not my job to tell them not to. I just thought this is horseshit. She's pushing out all of these people on these purity tests that she herself doesn't want to pass, can't pass. Buttigieg worked for McKinsey. Elizabeth Warren was a bankruptcy lawyer for DuPont Chemical Company. I mean, this is ridiculous. And now she's got Bloomberg. He's going to release these 3 women from non-disclosure, which I guarantee you Warren's going to make out of that and say, how come those 3? What about the 3 you didn't release out of it? So once again, nobody's going to be satisfied, and all it does is draw more attention to something that she brought up and made a big deal out of. People got to stop falling for her bullshit and her purity test, and I'm like, she's not going to drop out. She's going to go into Super Tuesday, lose her home state of Oklahoma, probably only win Massachusetts, maybe not even win that, but she'll come out of Super Tuesday with 1 state and she will stay in the race. She doesn't look like somebody who's going to quit to me. She really doesn't. I don't know why all these people are falling for this shit. But that's the Alabama Senate race in a nutshell. Oh, it's getting nasty and dirty and people are loving every second of it. But join us for episode 58, which is going to be a good one and coming up very shortly because the race is heating up. So we've got to have more episodes as fast as we can. All right, thanks for listening, everybody.